Welcome to Restore the Glory podcast. My name is Jake Kim.
And I'm Bob Schutz.
We're two Catholic therapists sharing what we've learned personally and professionally to help you on the journey of restoration. If you've been blessed by our podcast, please prayerfully consider partnering with us on Patreon. Your support will help cover the cost to produce the podcast, but will also give you access to exclusive content like monthly reflections and special live stream teachings. Go to patreon.com/restoretheglory and join the mission of experiencing the restoration of our God-given glory. Hey, Bob. Good to see you. How are you today?
I'm great, Jake. Just back from a big family reunion and tired, and it was a fun time.
You said something funny that I thought was cool, is that you were like, you're getting close to the line where people don't come back the next year. You're pushing closer and closer and closer to that line. That was an interesting reflection.
Yeah, I'm the oldest living of the second generation out of the 4 or 5 generations that are there. And I'm noticing that I'm getting on the, we had all of us line up that were present. There was 115 of us, and I was 9th in the line now.
What were you the last reunion? Like, do you remember? Were you like 20th or something?
No, I was probably still 10th because my grandmother was still alive.
Okay. Wow. There's something in there to say, but I feel like everything I would say would be rude somehow. So I'll just be quiet. I won't say anything. But we have some really cool people with us today, Bob. I would like to welcome 2 of our favorite people on the face of the planet, Father John Burns and Sister Miriam James. Hey, good to see you guys. This is so fun. So we're going to be talking about just stuff that's on their heart in particular. We'll get to that in a second. But Bob, you wanted to let our listeners know about something fun coming up that they can participate in.
Right in August, Sister and I are doing a virtual conference where we'll have, with John Paul II Healing Center, it's a 5-day Healing the Whole Person conference that'll be live. Sister and I will be live question and answer. Our spiritual director, Father Justin Brady, will be doing a live prayer of renouncing prayer and, just healing prayers and stuff. It's been great. The last couple of times we've done it, people have said that even people have gone through the other conferences have said just the pace of it and the way that it's laid out, and they got more healing in that week than they had gotten in the other experiences. And it just kind of blew us away. It's like people think that the virtual conference is kind of like, well, that's a less than. And yet we've been seeing just tremendous graces and fruit. So we just invite anybody that's a listener or your friends or family to sign up. Sister, what do you want to say about that?
Oh yeah, it really is a delightful experience, and people do say that, it's just virtual, but there's a live component every single day, and there's something really beautiful that people often find by being in the safety of their own home or a retreat center. They can go wherever they want, and they can stop the teaching, they can go for a walk, they can come back to it. There's something beautiful as it unfolds, and you meet people from all over the world in a live component. So it's really beautiful to see what God does, and we always say that God never does the same thing twice, and so it's wonderful to see what God will do this time.
Yeah, and we will have prayer ministry this time, which we haven't been able to have the last couple of times. So that's even going to add to everybody will have a prayer minister team set up.
That's pretty cool. Well, where could people sign up for this?
At the John Paul II Healing Center. It's August 5th through 8th.
Do they have to drive there to sign up, or what do they do if they wanted to online?
I think they can do that online, Jake. I think they can do that online.
So I just want to make sure the listeners get all the info. So you can type in John Paul II Healing Center into your Google search browser, or John Paul to, what's the website?
jpiihealingcenter.org.
There you have it. So you can go to jpiihealingcenter.org, and then you can register there for the virtual conference. And if you don't want to do that, Father John and I will be at some hotel in California sipping whatever drink we are, having a virtual swim tournament.
Oh boy, this is news to me, just so everybody knows.
Yeah.
I'm in for it, but that's news.
You've just been invited. We're like, the posters are coming out soon. Let me transition with that. So listeners, seriously, that's a great event. We want you to be able to participate in that. So I'm so excited to have the two of you on, and Bob set us up well. I want to launch in because I feel like something that we need to start off with is for people to have the perspective that you guys have had for a long time about the centrality of priests and religious for the health of the church. And just the unique perspective that you bring. When I first heard it, and I was like, I've been around a little bit. Whoa, this is incredibly beautiful. So could we start there so we can look at the world kind of, or the church, the way you guys do, and then maybe we can launch into some more of the healing stuff. So I don't know how you want to start that, but I'll let you go from here.
Father John, I say go for it. You paint a great picture.
Well, yeah, I can get started. Maybe you could pick it up from there, sister. But I think one of the central things that's been moving throughout everything we've been doing, but also just in our hearts, is the recognition that as the Lord calls us vocationally, that's His call, to holiness, and specifically a call to heaven by a concrete vocation, the recognition that all of the vocational states are in a relationship that we just often haven't understood or maybe haven't emphasized. And really, we use often the language of an ecosystem of vocations because it's a body and the parts of the body are all related. And the discovery that when any one of the major vocational states that we're kind of talking about here, so marriage, priesthood, consecrated life, religious life, when any one of those suffers or atrophies or loses its deep anthropological and theological anchoring, everything else feels that and has to kind of shift around it. And so in the kind of the via negativa, the way that a lot of this woke up, at least in my heart, was noticing growing up without religious sisters and thinking that was normal and just kind of assuming that's how the church is. And then going to seminary, I was over in Rome and interacting with a lot of religious sisters and noticing like, ooh, this is really different. Like this makes me want to be a better priest, makes me want to introduce every single one of my lay friends to these consecrated women because there's something so different in them than me. And really just praying with that for years and noticing like, yeah, wherever the church doesn't have that, everything gets a little bit confused. And the everything is the high stuff, like where are we headed? Who is the church, a bride? We're headed to the wedding feast of the Lamb, these things of scripture and our tradition that are not just ideas, they're reality. And when we don't have that reality lived, the confusion leads us to shift and adjust pretty much everything about the way we operate as a body, and we become a little bit more like just an institution. So learning to see how all of us have to see the beauty of each other's respective vocations and then be solicitous for them. And as one heals, all heal. As one becomes healthy, holy itself, all of the rest become healthy, holy, and themselves. And that opens up this beautiful, like, I want to be holy for the sake of the church, that when I live my vocation well, all the other vocational states also discover themselves in relation and without competition. So that's kind of the high level, but sister, how would you wrap that, or what else would you round that out with?
I was thinking this morning as I woke up about the reality of the movement, either toward communion or away from communion, and how, Jesus invites us to live on earth as it is in heaven, and the healing of heaven. What does heaven look like in communion in heaven? And really one of the reasons why we find in particular the vocational state so beautiful, but in particular the way that the priesthood and the consecrated life reveal that is the image of the spiritual mother, the spiritual father, or the image of the bridegroom and the bride. And we know that we as the church in totality are the bride of Christ. And there's a reality of that the Lord is desiring to heal us. And so we can live in our full capacity of who we are. And so many times we reduce our vocations to kind of a functional state, or, what can we do in this, material world? What does it offer? Many times people say, oh, we want sisters to come and teach. and it's wonderful that sisters come and teach, but there's a metaphysical reality and an eschatological reality to every vocational state that's pointing us toward heaven. And so what happens in our hearts when we see a couple get married? What happens in our hearts when we see an ordination or religious profession, or we just see people living out their hearts in deep places in this regard? It makes our heart sing for a reason, and because it's calling into eternity of the eternal marriage feast, the eternal wedding banquet, when Christ is our all in all, and everything is about Him and for Him, and we're received into Him forever for all eternity. So these are such deep themes in our hearts, and is something that as we walk our journey out on earth, that our faces are pointed toward heaven, into the eternal beauty of heaven.
Mm. One thing that's helped me and come to sense of this, and I'm not the smartest guy on the block, so I will walk around and go, okay, how do I make sense of these like really beautiful realities that sometimes to me feel like they're way out there? And so I've thought about it of like, the invisible world is very real. And so like I can't see my Wi-Fi working, but it's there. because stuff pops up on my phone magically and it shouldn't be able to get there. And so there's an invisible reality that's tugging my heart, drawing me into either the ultimate purpose of all things or somewhere else. And so what I feel like you guys have done and are doing is it's almost like you're pointing out these invisible realities that are at the core of existence, that if you don't get them, everything else kind of stands on not solid ground. And what are the core realities? God is real, and that he loves us and wants to have a particular kind of relationship with us. And so when you see these people, because the world looks at, I'll say it a bit awkwardly, but you people, as in a priest who's celibate and wears an outfit usually, and then a religious sister who's celibate and wears an outfit, everybody looks at you and goes, what is wrong with you guys? Like, you're weird, and you gave up maybe the one thing on the face of the planet that makes the most sense, which is relationship with a spouse and physical sexual intimacy. Why in the world would you have given all that up? You're weird, you're wrong, whatever, however they digest that. But what's crazy is that you're going, oh, we love you, but we disagree. At least that's how I'm interpreting it, because we're actually tapping into the ultimate reality that unfortunately maybe you've lost sight of. And that ultimate reality makes everything else make sense. It puts everything else in clear focus. And once you see it, the fulfillment you're longing for actually is found. And so then all of a sudden you guys go from weird to, holy smokes, you're like a beacon of light that's pointing people back in a way toward home. It blew me away because, sister, I love you and I love sisters. I was taught by sisters and all of that, but it's a whole different thing when you look at a sister and go, whoa, you are showing me what forever looks like. And I need to kind of pay attention to that, because I've asked myself the question, if I went to heaven, would I actually like it? Because something's wrong if I'm not going, I love what heaven is going to offer me. And what's weird is my heart at times goes, I don't know. Because all these things I'm attached to here, I won't have. But then I see a sister or I see a priest and I go, what are they calling me to? They're annoying in a wonderful way. They're not letting me stay comfortable in my small world. They're calling me to something greater. Can God actually satisfy me? Are you serious? Is that possible? But here you are proclaiming it in your vocation. And I hear, if you get those wrong and marriage becomes the pinnacle, we're in real trouble, because now earth tries to become heaven and then we're in major danger. Am I in the ballpark there?
No, total bingo. In particular, like that's a little bit of a spot, I think, Jake, where we misunderstood some of the good movements that were happening within the church. That as we, in some ways, we lost religious sisters. Some ways we lost a lot of priestly identity, or in the scandals and the crises, we kind of curbed a lot out of safety, prudence, but then also fear, and kind of looked to marriage to be the great and ultimate reality, which in many ways it is. I mean, Paul talks about it, though, in a way that opens up this conversation really beautifully, that marriage, when in Ephesians 5, when he's talking about marriage, it's going back and forth how a man and woman should relate. And then he says, in the end, he kind of gives up. He's like, in the end, what I'm trying to describe here is a great mystery. But I mean it in reference to Christ and the church. What he's saying there is that the thing isn't marriage. Like, we don't look at marriage to find the solutions to what creation's all about. We look at it as an icon, and it's meant to show us something that's deeper, ultimately real and everlasting, which is the marriage of Christ and the bride, the church. And that's vital, because if we can get that right and see that marriage isn't the solution, it's the icon, it's an image, but the icon itself it's like a triptych in a way, like the Trinity and marriage at the center, but it also needs these reference points that forego the natural, not to curb things, but to expand them. And in foregoing biological love, communion, generation, the one who's called to celibacy binds themselves to God and receives a gift to witness within nature something that is supernatural, that's not in nature, that is a gift from above. And the priest and the religious witness that in a different way, but in a way that is tied to the ultimate. As Sister said, like turning our heads toward our faces, toward the eschaton, toward heaven. The priest is meant to bring down one half of that, the real marriage, like the one marriage that doesn't fade away. Marriage is to get us to heaven, biological, natural, sacramentally blessed marriage, but those bonds pass as we move into heaven. There's only one marriage that lasts forever. It's Christ and the church, or his bride, the bridegroom and the bride. we celibates share in that now in a way that is meant to inform each other respectively, and also enkindle in the hearts of married couples, as well as priests and religious, an awareness that like there's one reality toward which we're headed, and it's a communion of love that we can't really imagine. And God's giving us these little sneak peeks in marriage and religious life, consecrated women, consecrated men. But it's all like we need each other to say like, I have a respective testimony to that, and I don't have the other parts. But if I put too much pressure on any one to have that whole story, the whole thing is gonna cripple and crumble. So you got it right. Marriage is at the center in many ways, but marriage needs to look to the image of the bridegroom and the priest, and the image of the bride and the consecrated woman, and be like, okay, that's a little bit of something that I'm feeling, but I don't know how to name, and they're living it differently. But also, we're all experiencing metaphysically a communion here that is pointing us toward the end. And if we don't have our faces pointed toward the end, we wander off and get lost. And that explains so much of the confusion of contemporary ecclesiology, but also just our culture.
Sister, what would you add to that?
Oh, no, that's very true. And our vocations need each other. And I think that's a beautiful thing. Even if somebody say, for example, people that are listening, like, oh, I'm single, but all of us our hearts are made to be given over. We're not meant to live, even to say in a single state. I'm not meant to be living for myself. My heart is to be meant to be lived for another. So like John Paul II speaks extensively about self-gift, is like the highest form of love is self-gift. And so all of us are meant for that, and all of us ache for that. And so our vocations, that gift of the other, we all need that in each other. And, Jake and Heather, I've known you for a long time, and Bob and you and Margie, before she passed away, I knew you guys for a long time. And watching how you guys lived out your marriage in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer, and seeing how you would repair, how you would love your children, how you were faithful to each other when it was really difficult, how you rejoiced in each other. It's such a sign to me of the tenderness of Christ and the fidelity and the outpouring love. And I remember, and I did my sabbatical year, I lived with, Bob's daughter, Carrie, and she's my age. And when I lived with them, they had 6 kids. Now they have 9 kids. And I remember living at their house and like cleaning for Carrie a couple days a week. And I'm like, I will never say I don't have any time ever again because watching her live that life and I need that gift. And they also need to see us that another human person is not our end all be all. Haven't we done that? We've all put the weight of eternal expectation on the shoulders of somebody else who can't bear it. Only Christ can bear that weight. And so that to the extent to which our vocations are healed, it just enriches, like Father John was saying, the ecosystem of the entire, the entire garden of life. And we need that, even if we can't name it, which is why I think when we start talking about these things, something happens in our hearts. We're like, oh, I know that. Like, I couldn't name that before, but I know what you're talking about. And I want sisters to be well. I want priests to be well. I want marriages to be well. I want families to be well. It's an ache for heaven. And we can't always articulate it, but we know we need it because that's what we're made for.
Yeah. As I hear you both, and this just gives me a lot of joy to know what you're doing and the way that you're living it out. And, it's easy from a theological standpoint to see the priest in the person of Jesus as the bridegroom, and to see the religious woman as the bride, and you even wear a veil that represents the bride. Where does the brother come in? Where does the religious brother come in terms of that picture?
Yeah, talking about the identities. It's a beautiful place of the brother by religious vows, cleaving to Christ in fraternity. So he all of us as sisters naming whatever, all of the baptized, we share in. There's a nuptial meaning to every vocation, every state in life. Even we're all a part of the bride. The brother cleaves to Christ as brother, and so he witnesses to what it is to live in fraternity and fraternal charity, and to be a part of this family as a son of the Father, but meant to testify especially to what it is to be a brother of the prime Son, the Son who is Son by origin and by nature, his own nature, which we only share in by grace.
Okay, and how does he live then out of the bridegroom and the father role, even as brother?
Yeah, it'd be like slightly different in that he's not pouring himself. The priestly oblation as bridegroom is, the theology of the church says the priest is configured to the heart of Christ, head, shepherd, servant, spouse. The brother doesn't have that because he doesn't exercise a sacramental share in Christ's ministerial priesthood. But as a man, as all men, there's this need in his own heart and in the church's heart to receive what the man has to give, which is the oblation of masculine love that's configured to Christ and is not confused. And so he as well will exercise a degree of spiritual fatherhood quite frequently that's growing out of his brotherhood with Jesus, but it will be a difference in degree. and will not have the sacramental character that the priestly witness and paternity and spousality will have. Fairly technical there, but it's like I think about this stuff all day.
No, that's good.
That's good.
That's good.
People ask that a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like this stuff, I love this stuff because what I feel like everybody does is we take for granted the basics. And I think, so listeners, if you're sitting there and you're in your car or you're doing whatever you're doing and you're going, why does this actually matter? And I think that feels like a thing that so many of us miss is we take a whole bunch for granted and just go, oh yeah, yep, got all that. And then we start building a house in our life on top of stuff. And what I feel like you guys are doubling down on is going, if we don't get the core realities of existence right, everything else is off. And it's like, oh, but it's not that big of a deal, right? If you build a house and you start in the corner and you're just a couple degrees off, when you get to the other side, the whole thing is jacked up. And it looks like, you got Frankenstein's house or whatever. Like, it's just not a pretty picture. And so when people look at their lives and go, I don't understand. Bob, we have seen this. Well, all of us have seen this in our pastoral ministries because all of us are in those roles. People desperately trying to come up with answers about why am I not happy? Why is this not working? Why is my marriage so crappy or blah, blah, blah. And I what I used to find in my practice a lot is I would do something called anthroeducation. It was just a word I made up. I don't even think it's a real word, but I just said to people, if we don't get the basics right, everything else is off. For example, where are you going for happiness? What's the meaning and purpose of your life? And they're like, oh, stop being philosophical. And I'm like, no, this has nothing to do with being philosophical. It has everything to do with the most basic core realities of existence. And if you don't have answers to these, you'll answer them. You just won't be aware that you're answering them. And then you'll arrive at ends and go, man, it didn't work. Well, let me try harder or find another thing in this realm. And it's radical. I mean, that's what's crazy, I think, about your guys' vocations, as well as you're not only living the vocations, you're like doubling down on the vocations of going, this is that thing you used to have when you would be you'd get McDonald's and it would have like a secret code and you had to put the red thing on top of it and then the word appeared and you'd be like, ooh, the secret keyword. I feel like you guys are like the red thing that goes on life. And then you look at it and you go, holy moly, what? I'm not supposed to find all my happiness in my spouse. Like, just that alone, sister, when you said that, that's actually relieving if you can embrace the reality of that. This person's not supposed to be the fulfillment of my entire existence. Wow, that's relieving.
Yeah, and our podcast is Restore the Glory podcast. And I think what you represent, and I want to get in here and talk some about what you're feeling called to in terms of the friends of the bridegroom. But what you represent and what you're talking about there, Jake, is restoring the glory to our vocations.
Amen.
It's like, what's the vision that shows Christ's love for the church? And so with that, if you both would talk about the friends of the bridegroom and how you started that and what it's about and what do you do and all that.
Thanks for that question. And I think, Jake, you set us up well there in just pointing out that, like, why does this matter? This matters because it's actually the structure of reality.
Yeah.
Like, this is how reality is structured. You read scripture, the whole thing is about the relationship of love that God wants to have with us. It's about a marriage, the Revelation, Genesis, you pull that all the way back through. The whole thing is about the wedding feast of the Lamb and the restoration and the renovation of the cosmos. And each of us shares in that in a different way. So it's like we either set these things aside and we just try to make things work as a church and get better at operating well and recruiting well and being more welcoming and more efficient and effective, all of which matters. But that's mechanical, and there are mechanics to the church, but underneath that has to be the metaphysics, like the actual structure of reality. And clearly we don't have a good grasp of that because we can't see it, so it's very difficult. But as soon as we kind of stumble into it, we see it lived in someone else, or we hear it, or we pray with it, it's like, oh, that's it. That's what I'm looking for. How do I awaken that? How do I live in that? How do I share that? Because that affects our evangelization, right? That affects the way we preach, proclaim, live, do the corporal works of mercy, the spiritual works of mercy. So we're trying to do, Friends of the Bridegroom, the title comes from St. John the Baptist, who's a friend of the bridegroom, which is a very significant title for the Jews, one who comes around the wedding and helps prepare the details and protects the bride and points her out to the bridegroom and gets ready for the wedding. So that's kind of our role here on earth in many ways for the church. But also John the Beloved, who after the resurrection receives Mary into his home and lives with the bride of brides, but not as his own bride, but learning from her what it is to be configured to the divine bridegroom. So underneath the title is this desire to awaken, really to advance and continue the work of John Paul II, which was to defend the beauty of the gift of married love, of human love, of the body as an image and icon of God, but then to extend it into things that he didn't quite get to because he was the Pope and didn't have all this time he was pointing out the eschatological states, but he had more to say, I'm sure. And so what we're doing is trying to bring that glory forth by awakening a movement in the church for the restoration of the bride. Because when the bride radiates, everybody loves being a part of the church and understands their place within it. And then it's actually about love and not about efficiency and institutional effectiveness. So the kind of a prime question for us is how do we awaken in the church an awareness of the nuptial meaning of every vocation, and in particular with a special solicitude for religious and priests? How do we help religious women, consecrated women, discover that they really are the bride of Christ, and if they live that shows us something that we're all curious about and confused about? How do we help priests discover that they come to life when they sit within the heart of Jesus and love the church with his heart? That's what the documents tell us a priest is supposed to be doing. The church longs to be loved by the priest with the same love by which Christ loves her. The church wants to be loved as a bride, but priest, that's confusing, and it can stumble into all kinds of bad theology and bad praxis. So sometimes for fear, we don't engage these realities, both for the men and the women, as bride and as bridegroom. But the church has been asking for this for decades through John Paul II and then all the formational documents. So how do we awaken a greater solicitude for that among religious, a great love for living deeply as consecrated women as brides, and then helping priests and laity see their place in relationship? How do we awaken in priestly hearts a fervor to be spiritual fathers, but who are also men in love with the bride, and they're fathering because they love, and they're sacrificing because they're in love with the bride, and they want to raise up those children? And then how do we mobilize, awaken, and enliven the laity to say, this isn't going to work without you. Like you're at the heart of the church. Do you care about the renewal of religious life, the renewal of the priesthood? Not because you're handing something off, but because if these are renewed, you are too, and we all are. And so we really want to mobilize a movement in the whole church for the restoration of the bride by prayer, fasting, almsgiving, to just awaken an awareness that we're all pointed toward the eschaton. And that's a high thing, but we have to live it deeply.
It strikes me before you share, sister, as you talked about John the Baptist and John the Beloved and Mary, that your name is John and your name is Miriam.
I thought the same thing.
And it's just the beauty of each of you living that out in that reality.
Yeah. That is a particular gift. And I think to speak from the feminine heart on that side, in the Song of Songs, chapter 5, verse 16, as the bride extols the beauty of her bridegroom, she says, "Such is my beloved, such is my friend." And so she's a friend of the bridegroom also. And she is, like John Paul II says, Adam looks at, his bride, he's like, you ravish, or in the Song of Songs, you ravish my heart, my sister, my bride, like the fellow in humanity, but also the one who's the friend. And friendship is the deepest form of love. As you know, both as, men who've been married, that when your wife is your best friend, like that sound foundation is what gives birth to everything else in life. And so she's also the friend of the bridegroom, and she's a different kind of friend than a man is to the bridegroom. And so that beautiful reality of a woman in particular, there's a wonderful supporter of Friends of the Bridegroom, and he said that a church without religious women is like a home without a mother. And there's a particular gift that a woman has that reveals intimacy. She reveals relationship. She reveals the interior workings, the mysterious workings of the human person. And there's a particular way that a consecrated woman reveals that to the world because of her intimacy with Christ, because of her friendship, because of the beauty of her heart extolling the bridegroom and what she hears from the bridegroom, and how she reveals that tenderness, the humanity, the goodness, the sacredness, the reverence. And there's something that the world learns from her about how she reveals the bridegroom. And so the restoration of her heart, and I just to say that for everybody listening, that something that we often share with people is that a religious vocation, whether it's to, religious life or consecrated life or to the priesthood, is not a reward for good behavior. And sometimes I think, in formation, we're trying to I just want to do this thing. I want to get to the prize. Or we talked about even in our seminary formator program of the internal and external form and kind of what guys want to do in order to get ordained, get the prize. Or as religious sisters, it's kind of well, do I have to share this? What if I don't, what if I can't get professed? And it's not that gift that God has given is a gift given in the womb. And it's a revelation of intimacy. It's a revelation of belonging, the charisma of celibacy. And so there's a metaphysical reality, like we were saying, that just pours forth from that. That's such a beautiful gift of restoration. And we need that gift. And it is in the church's best interest. And it's kind of funny me saying this as a religious sister, but it's in the church's best interest that religious women are well, that consecrated women are well, because the degree to which we are integrated as women and as, daughter, sister, bride, and mother and spiritual mother, as we reflect the particular heart of Our Lady on earth, that, the world never stops needing a mother. The degree to which we can do that more and more is the degree to which we can reveal that gift of the bride and where we're going in heaven. And we need that gift. And so the healing and renewal and expansion of religious life in America, but really across the world, is of a paramount importance to all of us, because it's a revelation of the heart of Mary. And we all ache for that. We all ache for our moms to be well, for the bride to be well.
This is your guys' domain, but it was on my heart, and I don't know if this will take us way off track, but I was writing down the various states of life. So you have a celibate priest, then you have a celibate religious sister, then you have a married husband and a married wife and a single person. And I think that's everybody. Sorry if I'm forgetting somebody, but
religious brother, consecrated women.
Whoops-a-daisy. Yep. So a religious brother, and then what was the other one, Bob?
Consecrated woman.
What's the difference between a consecrated woman and a celibate sister? Or maybe I'm using the wrong words.
Sister, do you want to address that, or Father John?
Yeah, I mean, we could go down there, but it's a different canonical state. But the consecration is it's lived out differently. So in religious life, a woman would live out that vow in a community in a particular way of life, whereas a consecrated virgin or a consecrated woman might live that out a little bit differently. So it looks different, but the consecration is to Christ. Okay. So just a matter of way that it's professed. I would say that's probably a very simple way of saying that.
Yeah, thank you for the nuancing. Because as I'm looking at them, you see male and female, and you see these various ways that they live out their vocation, and everybody has a role. It's like I'm seeing everybody in a circle, and we're all kind of looking at each other. And I know mine pretty well. I'm like, okay, I know me. Obviously, that's my world. But as I'm looking around, I'm wondering if you guys could almost, figuratively speaking, kind of walk up to each individual in the circle and almost say, here's where we need you. Here's why we need you. And this is what your job is. This is what you're proclaiming to the rest of us. Please, we need you to ... So for the priest, him in the circle, that's to me the context of you're not out there isolated way off just, doing budgets and pastoral council meetings. You're in this circle of the church. And I wonder, because each of us are even listening to this podcast. We have everybody listening to the podcast. All of these types of people listen. And it would be cool for me. And again, you might go, Jake, cool idea. Let's do that another time. But to look over and listen to you talk to the priest and go, oh, okay. Because then I can hear that and try to love him well. And then I can try to love the sister well with all of this going around. Does it make sense what I'm saying? Could we try that quickly, or is this going to take us down a rabbit trail?
Well, I mean, we could do a whole episode on it, but we could do the glance down the rabbit hole.
Okay. Okay, sweet.
I'll start. I think it comes back to the reality that men and women are different. Masculinity, femininity are not just physical realities, but they have supernatural spiritual expressions. And when God invites someone to consecration, he's not, he does no violence to nature. He's not truncating that, cutting that out, neutering it. He's raising something up that for fullness and flourishing of the subject, the person, that has to be expanded and brought into one state of consecration. And that expresses something for all the other states that is informative and revelatory. So it's a very specific answer. The church, the language right now of the new document on priestly formation, which comes from a document from Rome, is that the priest, the man is to be configured to Jesus Christ, head, shepherd, servant, spouse. It's a 4-part, it's a tetrad. I learned that word recently. I knew dyad and triad and monad, but tetrad's 4. It's a tetrad.
Nice.
And so wherever we can help priests see that and call them into that and encourage them in that and affirm them in that, they will be radiating the priestly character that the church says the priest is meant to bear. when he stands in persona Christi, that's what he reveals. And that's not just for him to do well. That's for the church to understand who Jesus is in the priesthood, and thus also who the bridegroom is, who's coming back for his bride at the end of time. On the feminine side, consecrated women, you can broadly collect them all under the banner of witnessing to that bridal nature of the church and sharing in it. So as the priest is configured to Christ, in a way, it's not the same theologically, but the consecrated woman is an icon, a face of the church who is the bride. And so her importance to the whole thing is when she lives that deeply, her consecration, not only is she showing Jesus as a living bridegroom, because nobody marries a dead man. They marry someone who's alive. Like Christ is alive. I'm married to him and I'm in love with him and I'm happy because he's so real that his love is perfecting my own life. But she's also revealing the church's nature. The church is a bride, and that's very confusing and hard to understand until you look at Mary. You're like, oh, that's the bride. And then you see Mary's face in her religious, and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. Church, bride, Mary, bride, religious bride. I'm starting to understand how this goes upward. Both of those come around marriage, and all of us need to look at marriage to be like, how do you live that concretely? What does it look like in the day-to-day to sacrifice, in the day-to-day to pour out, in the day-to-day to make sure those sacrifices are because of love? And each of them, masculine and feminine realities, physically expressed or appropriate in marriage, supernaturally expressed in all of them, have something to do with our collective metaphysical understanding of the structure of reality. Again, high level. Sister Miriam, put flowers on it, please. This is Sister's gift. She always puts flowers on it.
No, that's true. And I think we can look at everybody and we can look at people's, like John Paul II, we can look at their bodies and say, you make sense. Like your life makes sense. Like the order as man and woman, this makes sense. And it might on earth witness to a different part of that heavenly reality and what we're called to, but it actually makes sense. So there's no person in life who doesn't have a way of love, a way of self-gift that makes sense and that is fruitful and effective. And I think even now, like just, thinking of your story, Bob, as a widow or people that are divorced or people that just suffer, like people just bear so many sorrowful sufferings. And in life, we all come to certain stages where we're like, does my life still matter? Do I still have something to offer? Do I still give a witness? And yes, just by the gift of being made in the image and likeness of God, you bear his heart in a way that nobody else bears. And the particular way that he's calling you to give the gift of yourself and love, it matters. And it can be fruitful, and it's fruitful into eternity. There's no end to that. And that's the ache of every human heart.
I have my mind's going in two directions, and so let me put them out there and we can discern. One is to ask you about the ministry you do with religious women and priests. The other is to get down to a more kind of a relational level of, this is language of sexuality, and how does it stay safe in the church, and how does it get out of bounds? So I don't know which direction to go in, and I know we don't have a lot of time, but you have a sense?
Maybe there's a connection point between the two in that most of the work, at this point, Friends of the Bridegroom, our deep heart is to awaken a movement in the whole church, and especially to like awaken the laity to the fact that like this is a serious thing that if you care about it, everybody's going to be well, and it's going to make you better. Around that, and within the center of that, we begin the work with helping religious sisters to heal and to settle into their own, the glory of their own calling. And through that also to help priests heal and settle into the glory of their own calling. A part of the reason that this is a tenuous arena for priests and religious is you read the Song of Songs, you read this language, you're like, well, that sounds sexual. And I've given up sex and family. I'm celibate, so I can't engage those things, which is a reasonable point, except there's this great quote, I'll have to paraphrase, I don't have it in front of me, but people often accuse the mystics of writing a lustful passion. But they forget that lustful passion plagiarized the mystics and took something deeper and twisted it into carnal realities.
Wow.
The fact is, God's love is passionate. It's agape love. When you look at Deus Caritas, that's the four types of love. God is expressing himself in great fervor and passion. The priests and religious, the celibates, afraid of the body, and at times very prudently so, because we know our passions. But that is often curbed in the heart of the religious woman, for example, a fear of the Song of Songs, a fear of what it means to love Christ passionately and even romantically. And the priest, what it is to love the church with Christ the way that he does. And so a big part of this is like, look, the archetypal, pivotal, central realities are Jesus Christ, bridegroom, Mary, bride. Neither of them expresses a passionate love in any carnal or sexual fashion. When God relates to the soul, he will speak in very passionate, delicate, tender, and beautiful, and even romantic terms, but he's never speaking of touching the body sexually. We come into it in that place because that's our experience after the fall, but that's not God's approach and never would be. And so really anchoring the renewal in like real configuration to Christ and real sharing in Mary's heart, like understanding how to purify and order love, how to let grace bring about that original glory and that plan that was first beautiful before it was twisted and corrupted. And say there's a way to passionately love as a man, a bride, the way that Jesus did. He loved the bride and never expressed himself carnally, sexually, physically, sinfully. Same is true of Mary in the reverse. And so that's actually at the center of so much of this is awakening for priests and religious what the nuptial meaning of our vocation really is, why we need to be reverent, but also not fear that. And then how do we look at the wounds that have come against that? Let the truth come into those places, restore memory and order to even the present state of the heart. So you can, in the confidence of love, actually love fully alive as a man, as a woman, without being dangerous and without needing to fear.
Mm-hmm.
Which really circles back to the whole work that we, all of us here, we work with you, Bob, met in various, ways. And it just goes back so much to John Paul II's theology of the body. And what does it mean to love well? And how do we give the gift of ourselves and love well? And where are the places that all of us fear our masculinity for men and our femininity for women, places where we've been wounded, places where the stories of our sexuality and its brokenness are still being played out today? Like, where are those places of such tenderness? And I think especially for priests and religious sisters where there's so much shame held there. Mother Mary Frances in her conferences on brideship, she tells the sisters that we don't check our womanhood at the door when we enter the convent. And I know so many religious sisters, myself included, for so many years, you feel like you have to check your womanhood at the door. And anything tender or feminine or beautiful or floral or kind or flowing is seen as dangerous. And I just look at Our Lady and I look how she cares for Nazareth, and that's not her heart. Her heart is so beautiful. And so I think that particular healing of like when the spiritual mother and the spiritual father are well, like in the family and in any home, that the family is well. And so that particular inviting priests and religious sisters, especially into their own stories, into the mercy of God, into those instances of sorrowful mysteries, into those instances of desire as well, of allowing God to heal that only blesses everyone. And I mean, Father John and I think we could both say this would be the ministry we do every day, all day for the rest of our lives, like hands down. The healing of the hearts of religious sisters and priests. To me, it's the deepest apostolic need of the church. And just, it's an honor to sit in those sacred places with them. It's such an honor.
As you guys are sharing, I just want to share some personal testimony. And then I have to me, maybe the biggest question I could possibly ask you, but I feel like this is the right place to ask it. I think everybody on the podcast knows about my background and my story of sexual impurity and being exposed to, childhood dynamics and all that kind of stuff. And what I have to say is two things have happened in that. I've come to really see and unfortunately appreciate, and I don't mean it like I condone it, but I can sure see it, the particular assault of the enemy on the very domains we're talking about that then lead to, well, there's no way that can be fulfilling. And what you guys are talking about, for me as a man, when I look at a religious sister who's doing well and sister, I love the language you just put, who doesn't check her femininity and womanhood at the door, and just the words you use, like flowing and tender and kind and beautiful. Those are words that are like healing to my wounds in those domains. But what pornography tries to do is it tries to suggest you can have this and almost grasp it and consume it and stomp it, and it doesn't matter, and you'll get this illusion of it, because the ultimate lie there is it's not enough unless you like devour. There's no way you can receive it. You have to grasp it and take it. And so when you see a religious sister living in the fullness of her call, she's healing. To a lay married man, she's healing, because I look at her and go, wow, you're beautiful and you're pure. And you show me that it's like there's nothing about it that makes me feel graspy, because the habits and all of that done well, my senses are brought into something that's instantly healing. And there's such a powerful dynamic. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I think religious sisters are critical to the redemption of the pornography wound that's rampant throughout the culture right now, because you show us women rightly again. And I've experienced it. I could think of numerous sisters. Sister Miriam, you and I are quite close. You being one of those, I can share this in front of you without being an awkward, with just me going, wow, she's so beautiful. But there's something about her that I don't want to use her. I don't want that. I feel wrong about that. And so my masculinity is brought to this higher call of, and then I'm faced with the question, and here's the difficult question that I think the crux of it comes back to. And you guys are living it, and it's just like, damn, this is a hard question. And here it is. Will God actually satisfy me if I live my vocation just as I feel that I'm called to live it? And for me, that's married to Heather in the current, in that vocation, and you guys living it. Bob, you as a single man, we represent a lot of different vocations here. To me, the core question comes back to, will he actually satisfy me? Is it enough for me as a married man to just receive, sister, I'll use you as an example, to receive your beauty as the Lord allows me to receive it and not grasp? Will that actually satisfy me? Will it be enough? Will I be okay? Do I have to take matters into my own hands and serve myself up a side dish of beauty so that I feel like I'll be okay? You know what I mean? Like, there to me is the crux of the question, at least in my heart. So I just want to go, will it?
Yeah, man, beautiful question. Thanks for framing it that way. And the answer has to be anchored in another question of, what do we mean by satisfy me? In that, we all have that question in a way. I was just at a student conference just now, and I'm talking to the high schoolers who are coming forward to talk about vocations. And it's like, will I be happy? Like, is God going to be enough if I choose to forego the things I want? We all have that question. Priest, religious, lay, married. And the reason the answer is tenuous is because, in a way, here, we're all waiting to be satisfied, in air quotes. We're waiting for the final consummation of everything. We're waiting for the fullness that isn't here. And so in a way, there's always this ache. All of creation groans. And in the groaning, we either turn toward the Lord and run together and look at each other like, okay, you're showing me something, religious, show me something, priest, something, married. Or we look at each other in a threatened kind of orphan mindset, a self-provision, rebellious, fallen mindset, and start to grab on to be like, I don't know, so I'm going to grab this for the journey. I'll keep going on the journey, but I'm going to grab this and bring it with me. This side dish, that relationship, that attachment. And whenever that's happening, we're not free to run. And so we start walking, and eventually we start trudging, and eventually we stop, and we're not even looking to the horizon any longer. When we do live it all together, well, it's like, yes, God will be enough, always is enough. And yet I'm going to ache for that until I'm there, because I'm also still in the flesh, and the old and the new are still in battle. But that's why this restoration is like, it's a healing of the entire church. It's a healing of the deep. It's a healing of the wound of sin and the confusion that comes from that sin, so we can see the truth and run toward it together.
Amen. Thank you.
Sister, what do you want to add to that?
Amen. I just think of, this is the call, like we said, of all of our hearts. All of us want to be eternally satisfied. It's what, Pope Benedict writes about in God is Love, about eros, about searching love, about the love that seeks to go out of itself to be satisfied, the ascending love and the descending love of eros and agape. And that's the piercing moments of beauty that all of us have that we want to hold. Just this morning, I had my windows open and the sun was rising and it was cool and the birds were chirping and I had a cup of coffee. And it's just one of those moments where like, I want to grab onto this and just hold onto it forever. But it's like, all I can do is just receive the beauty and thank God for it and give it back to him and know that this is a small foretaste of the promise of eternity. There's a great saying in AA meetings that one drink is too many and 1,000 is never enough. And I think that's what happens like when we grab on anything that's disordered, like one, it's just too much, it destroys us. And then you get like, no matter how many side dishes we put on our table, it's never enough, because that's not the eternal banquet. That's not what we're made for. And that's like what Father John was saying, like that's the reality of what we're made for. We can't bypass that. And thank God, I'm so grateful we cannot bypass reality, because we're made for eternal beauty and nothing less than that will satisfy.
So let me ask a very practical question. As you've been journeying in this direction, has your sense of fulfillment increased?
Oh my goodness, yeah. For me, it's been the discovery that out of fear, I didn't know how to let my heart come to life. And I reduced myself to like a single dad, trying to run a parish and figure everything out and ask for help where I really need it, but I'm really just like delegating tasks. And coming into discovering why there's fear, and also how to relate to religious women well, how to relate to lay women well, how to relate to my brothers well, priests and lay. Discovering, like, I had a lot of healing. I'm in the middle of so much of it, but a lot of healing to go through there to come into the safety of love and rightly ordered love, and know that, like, when I love well, when it's an ordered love that I give, it heals, it brings life to the church. And so as I move in that, I become more confident in the priesthood and in my share in the priesthood and how powerful it is, because I'm discovering I'm taking less and less of it for myself and trying to do less and less on my own, because I'm leaning on Jesus in his heart, but I'm also leaning on the church as my bride. I've been like, what do you need? How do I listen, Jesus, in your heart to how to love her better, the bride? And for me, a big help has been being around women religious who are really living it well, because that's an impractical idea. It's not concrete. I can't grasp it, and even Mary is a great image, but Mary's stuck in stone and paint. Sometimes she's an icon, an image. But when you see that enfleshed in these women religious, these consecrated women, like, okay, I want to serve her the way that I would serve Mary. And in doing that, I want to serve the church that way. And now I'm actually learning what the heartbeat of Jesus feels like. And I'm happier. I'm more alive. I'm more fervent. I can sacrifice better because it's not just a drain, it's a gift. So it's awakened everything. It's awakened the whole priesthood. And that, to my mind, we need that in the whole church, in every state. But that's my priestly witness. But sister, what's your religious witness to that?
Certainly. I'm so grateful to be on this journey. It's like Father John said, we're all of us, Bob and Jake, you would say too, we're all on the journey of integration, of loving the way Jesus loves. And I think as I grow in age as a woman, not a little girl anymore, and as I grow in my religious profession, just the beauty of the brideship, the beauty of spiritual maternity, but also the deeper healing of being a daughter and a sister as well. And the more I'm surrounded by people like you guys and the people that I know in my life that are walking the same journey, it is so healing and restorative. And I think everybody has their own story of coming into religious life, but I think some of the themes that were at the very beginning of my religious life from outside of myself were, God, what's wrong with you? Like, why would you waste your life? Like, why would you give up everything? Why would you waste your life? Like, what's wrong with you? And just realizing, from the very beginning, that's untrue, but just the particular gift of the heart of a woman and the need to have that kind of mom, the need to have that kind of spiritual friend with you on the journey. And the revelation of heaven, I think, has been deeply healing in the places of my own life where there have been tremendous wounds, where things like that have been taken from me or been squashed. And so the Lord, as I grow, brings those things to life in marvelous and beautiful ways. And I only know that it'll get better and better. And yeah, there are a lot of aches as well, like anything else in life. There's a lot of sacrifices. There's a lot of ache. There's a lot of surrender. But I so often, like, would we really have it any other way than this way? There is, to whom else shall we go? It's the best way possible.
Wow. I want to do 17 more episodes with you guys. But we're close to our time for today. There's so much goodness here. Father, sister, any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners? And then maybe somewhere in there you can tell people, like, what if they're hungry for more, what's the next step? Like, where can they go from here?
Yeah, maybe I'll lead here, sister. But what we found everywhere that we speak about this with every audience, bishops, religious, superiors, brand new women in formation, lay people, married, single, it touches upon something that just moves in the heart. And so you have that sense of resonant frequency where you know that it is the Lord speaking, it's the Holy Spirit moving in the church, and he's clearly asking for something new, which is not like innovative. It's just fundamental, and an awareness of that fundamental ripple within all of creation that has to be brought into like full song and not just subdued whisper. And so listen to that in your hearts, whatever's moving in your heart here, like, this is the Lord awakening in you his own desire to share in the renewal of the church, the restoration of the bride, the raising up of like a vibrant, beautiful, harmonious song across the calling of God in all the states in life. And there's a place for all of us to play in that. The principal place we're inviting people at the beginning is to pray daily. And we've got a little prayer for renewal. And sister, you might talk about the website, but to fast, to actually make penitential sacrifices for the renewal of the church, for the renewal of your vocational state, the vocational states of those around you, and to give alms. prayer, fasting, almsgiving is the old, fantastic biblical triad. Like, let's rely on that. Let's press that out into the church, and then let's watch what the Lord awakens, and then we're going to steward and shepherd that and discern exactly how to structure the movement, how to channel its power, how to harness it, and let the Lord just have his way.
Yeah. Yeah, we have a really beautiful website created by Emily Davenport, a woman on our team, and the website's called renewreligious.org. And there's a lot of great things on that. Father John won't say this, but there's a great talk that he gives about this, everything that we're talking about, the ecosystem of vocations and the healing of religious life and things like that. And so praying, fasting, and giving alms is a great thing. And that starting, allowing the Lord to begin a movement in the church for the renewal of the bride is something that is so deep in the hearts of people. Something that we've been really excited about at Friends of the Bridegroom is beginning what we call the culture of vocations. And so working with, awareness, encounter, and accompaniment. How do you help women, and how do you help communities really become open to the beauty of religious life? Not just, I want sisters here, but what is everything we've just been talking about? What does that look like? How do you create meaningful encounters with consecrated women? How do you accompany women on the journey? A lot of times people think, oh, the sisters will take care of that. But I guarantee you, every single person that's listening, there are women in your community who are discerning religious vocation and don't know what to do and don't know where to go. And many times people don't know how to help. So how do we do that? So that's something that we're developing, where you can import that information in your community today and just begin a journey of creating a culture of vocations in your families, in your homes, mom and dad. You're the first vocation directors for your children as mom and dad, and watching, how do you give the gift of yourself in love? And so it really does require the whole church to become well. And so that's really what we're about.
Yeah, if I could add, the conferences that you do, both through Friends of the Bridegroom and through John Paul II Healing Center, just brings so much grace and beauty to the religious communities and to the religious. And Kim Glass is a part of that team with the two of you. And just the joy I have every time you do that. And one's coming up again, it'll probably be done by the time people hear this. But you're going to spend 2 weeks with these leaders in religious communities and go really deep in their healing, and the fruit of that is going to be beautiful.
It's such an honor to do that, yeah.
It's what's fun to watch is how much our work with Friends of the Bridegroom is the same work as JP2 Healing Center. It's like we're advancing or carrying the work at JP2 Healing Center into the celibate states for the sake of the whole. And it's like this tremendous, I don't even know if it's a synergy, it's just like the same work, just applied in a particular setting that is feeding the whole. And it's like, yeah, it's just amazing to watch the Lord pull all these threads together and be like, I've been working on this song for a long time, and it's time to start singing together. It's just awesome.
Amen. I think something that is really striking me from today is healing can't occur unless you're also allowing the healing of your perspective in reality. Like, you can't be fully healed unless you see reality as it is. And we miss that in modern psychology big time, where healing gets skewed because there's no, this is the core reality. This is the core truths of existence. Like, if you don't get that right, good luck with the rest of the healing journey. And so this is why I think this is so fundamental. Bob, it reminds me of our very first series that we did on healing and the theology of the body. This is this unpacked even further. It's the sound anthropology that then sets the groundwork for happiness and satisfaction to even be truly possible. Father, thank you so much for being with us. You guys are the best, and we absolutely love it. And so, again, it's consecrated. What's the website again, sister?
renewreligious.org.
renewreligious.org. We'll put that in the show notes. We're going to throw some other things in the show notes as well. Like, if you search on YouTube for Father John and Sister, they have some amazing talks they've done on forgiveness and other things. God bless.